Hey guys, I am ready to start chapter 2 of our book, The Porcupine Year. And here we meet the titular character, or the character in the title, the Porcupine. Chapter 2. As she floated toward morning underneath the canoe, Omakayas put her sleepy fingers on the beads at her throat. She was dreaming of Nokomis, her grandmother. Nokomis had worn these red beads ever since Omakayas could remember. One day she had put her arms around her granddaughter and said, "My little girl, you are becoming strong and generous. You are going to be a woman sometime this year. I give you my red beads."
"What do I get?" Pinch had asked. "I'm fearless, handsome, and truly kind."
"Here, chew this," said Nokomis, and she'd given him a strip of dried meat. Pinch was delighted.
"You can't eat beads," he said, walking off with his mouth full.
Now dream and memory mixed, and Omakayas touched the smooth, round beads at her throat. Maybe her red beads were going to be useful, or maybe Pinch was just hungry. That was a sure bet. Omakayas was no longer a little girl. She was that creature somewhere between child and woman, a person ready to test her intelligence, her hungers, a dreamer who did not yet know her limits, a hunter like her brother who was beginning to possess the knowledge of all that moved and breathed, a friend who did not know how far her love might extend. A daughter who still winced at her mother's commands and who loved and shyly feared her distant father. A girl who'd come to know something of her strength and who wanted challenge and would get it in the years of her family's exile from their original home, the island of the golden-breasted woodpecker. That place was in her heart even now as she touched the red beads at her throat and began to wake so far away, curled for warmth next to her irritating brother. "Pooheen, you stink!" She rolled away from him toward the crack of light under the canoe. Lifting the canoe's edge warily, she examined the shore. Empty. Gingerly, she crawled out. Behind her, Pinch was waking grumpily.
"How can I stink if I was washed in a crazy rapids? You're the one who stinks."
That was just normal talk with them, and it didn't mean anything at all. The two had started their days together with mild insults even before they left the island. To speak pleasantly to each other would have shocked the whole family. A family both of them missed very much at this moment. Pinch crawled out from under the canoe, too. His hair, stiff and wiry, stuck in all directions. He was an unusually strong boy, which was why he had tested his strength with the bow and also tested his sister's patience by hunting at night.
"I only wish we were back on the island," he said, sighing with self-pity. "At least I'd know where we were."
Suddenly, he popped his eyes out at Omakayas, who laughed. Despite his troublesome ways, Pinch could always make her laugh. Plus, he was a practical boy and was already planning how to get back to his family. He was, after all, very hungry.
"Let's just walk back," he said. "We'll go along the river."
"And leave our canoe?"
"It's old."
"Gaween, it's still good."
"It's heavy."
"You big baby. Dede and old Tala made it. Nokomis finished it off. What do you think they'll say if we leave it?"
"We'll come back for it."
But Omakayas was stubborn and refused to leave the canoe behind, even though they'd be unable to paddle it up the roaring stream and would have to carry it through the heavy growth by the river. "Pinch, there's no choice. We must portage the canoe back to camp. They'll be waiting."
"Well, of course they'll wait for us," said Pinch, hurt. "Mama couldn't get along without me."
"You mean me?" said Omakayas.
"Do we have anything to eat?"
Pinch's voice was small and wistful. He sounded like a little boy, not the warrior he pretended to be. He sat down on a log, looking out over the lake, and scratched his head. Then he threw himself onto the ground and groaned,
"I'm getting weak."
Omakayas looked around. She still had her woman's knife secure in its beaded sheath at her belt, along with her fire steel. Sometimes she carried loops of sinew along with the knife, but she'd already checked and found that she had none. She could have used the sinew to set a snare, maybe catch a rabbit, roast it if they got brave enough to make a fire. Her mouth watered at the thought. She was hungry too. She went to the lake, put her face down to the clear surface, and admired the tiny colored pebbles on the bottom. She cupped her hands and drank, then smoothed her hair back and rebraided it quickly.
"If you're trying to make yourself beautiful," Pinch called, "give up. It's no use. Come on back. I see breakfast."
"What?" Omakaya scrambled back to Pinch's log, where he was still lying flat on the ground looking up into the trees. He pursed his lips up and pointed with his gesture into the budding leaves. Tucked into the crook of a branch, a porcupine, or gog, rested. It was only a baby, but looked quite plump and would certainly be tender stewed up in a porcupine soup.
"All we have to do is knock it down from the tree," said Pinch in a pleased voice. "I'm just lying here trying to do it with my thoughts."
"That could take a while, Brother Stomakaias. Your thoughts are feeble. I think we should try a stick."
"Good idea."
Pinch got up, his hair now even wilder, full of leaves, and the two searched the fringe of woods until they found a good long stick that would serve as a knocking pole. Pinch climbed into the lower branches of the tree, then edged himself up a little higher, and Omakayas fed the pole up to him. The Gog was still sleeping. It made no move to get away from them. The Gog's main protection is, of course, its quills, and not many animals will climb after them to eat them. Pinch's poking stick surprised the baby. It opened its little black eyes and then tried to dig its claws into the bark. After a few more jabs and pushes, the stick sent the Gog tumbling down. Unfortunately, the porcupine bounced off Pinch. Hey! Omakayas heard her brothers scream of pain, but she ignored them in order to get the porcupine. She rushed to the creature as soon as it landed, turned it over with a shorter stick, and prepared to plunge her knife swiftly into its soft underbelly and heart. A Gog has a sweet, trusting, bewildered little face, and this one was so small, she didn't really like to end its life. She paused. But Omakayas was very hungry, so she lifted her knife. The Gog breathed out and closed its eyes, as if it knew it was doomed. Pinch climbed down from the tree, whimpering a little, and cried, "Stop!" Omakayas froze and took her knife away from the creature. "Sister, are you heartless? Look at me!" Omakayas turned to look at Pinch, and perhaps heartlessly, but certainly helplessly, laughed. There he stood, his hair every which way, full of leaves and Gog quills across his shoulders and down one arm. There were quills in his cheeks and even one sticking from the end of his nose. Ha ha! Omakayas could not contain herself. The laughter overwhelmed her. She fell on the ground and had to force herself up, saying, "Brother, I pity you, but you look ha ha." The quill on the end of his nose undid her, and she fell down laughing again. "Heen, brother, I am sorry for you. Let me help." Pinch was savagely pulling the quills out with his own fingers, screaming with every one. In his pain, he grabbed the quills carelessly so that they stuck his fingers. Now his fingers were also quilled. "Oh, Quill Boy, my brother, let me help you. Please, be still." But first, Omakayas lifted her knife yet another time to deal with the little porcupine, which was trying to sneak away. To her surprise, Pinch, or Quill, as he'd be known once the story was told, said, "No, leave it." "Golween, I'm hungry," said Omakayas. "Me too, but I'll catch something else," said Pinch. "What do you mean?" "A warrior does not take revenge on the helpless," said Pinch solemnly. "I shall spare its life." "Well, I'll leave it for now," said Omakayas, eyeing the juicy creature. "But once you suffer the removal of these quills, you may decide to revenge yourself. The porcupine wasn't all that helpless." Pinch let his sister pluck out the quills with careful fingers, making a noise as each one came out. "Ow! Wah! Ow! Owie! Ooh!" Omakayas put each quill on a piece of bark until she had a little stack, and when she was finished, she meticulously wrapped the quills in the bark and put them in the pouch at her waist. By now, the porcupine was watching them curiously, no longer interested in leaving. Quill plucked a little soft bark from the base of a green stick and gave it to the trusting creature. It made a happy little clucking noise and began to munch. "Perhaps," he said in a portentous voice, "this will be my medicine animal." "I will make you something with these quills to honor your great battle with the Gog," said Omakayas. "Aw, sister, you do me too much honor," said Quillboy. "Way too much. I wish you'd just forget about the battle, but let's keep this little Gog." "Alas, I can't forget," said Omakayas. "The memory of your fierce display is burned into my heart." It was bad of her, but she still wanted to laugh. Now poor Quillboy was pocked with little holes all over his arms and shoulders. The hole in his nose made him look even more ridiculous. "You look like you were in a battle with 1,000 miniature warriors, and they hit you with their arrows. Tiny ones." Omakayas twisted her face to stop her laughter, but a snort escaped. She pretended to control herself. "My brother, I am in awe of the great deed you did today." "Then I'm making a fire," said Pinch. "Give me your striker. If our enemies discover us, I'll quill them to death. I am not Quillboy, but Quill, just Quill, the great Quill. We're going to feast on my courage now." Omakayas turned, though she didn't feel much like killing the little porcupine. She lifted her knife one last time. "No, don't kill my porcupine. I'll find some other food." Pinch strode out into the lake until the water was thigh-deep. Omakayas was exasperated with her brother's odd behavior and was now even hungrier. Pinch stood dramatically in the shallows and said, "Look!" He plunged his hand down and, to his shock, came up with a fish. "What?" he said, gaping at the fish in his hand. He ran to the shore. "How? Look, sister, this porcupine is definitely a helping spirit." Omakayas looked down at the little porcupine. It gazed shyly up at her. It blinked. You really can't pet a porcupine, thought Omakayas. What would Quill do with it? Quill threw the fish at Omakayas' feet with an annoying grunt, just like the grown-up warriors sometimes did when they killed a moose or a massive beaver. It's not that big of a fish, Quill Boy, said Omakayas.
Did you ever catch a fish with your bare hands?
No, said Omakayas. She banged the fish against a rock and proceeded to clean it with swift expertise.
I didn't think so, said Quill.
After they had roasted the fish and eaten it, Quill reached out and grasped the porcupine's front paws and swung the little creature onto his head. The porcupine dug its dull claws into the mass of knotted Quillboy hair, and soon, to Omakayas' amazement, it went to sleep. And that's the end of Chapter 2 of The Porcupine Year.